Okay, I think we are live. Just need to confirm with the YouTube interface thing. Switching back to my camera. Cool, I see myself. Hi there, hope you're doing well. Today is Monday, May 13, 7:47 a.m. A little bit earlier than usual. Yeah, just got to my co-working space a little bit earlier. I thought I'd do a live stream because why not? Live streams are fun, and I get to do some live coding stuff and sip some coffee. The good news is my microphone is working well again. I got a replacement mic, so hopefully my audio is sounding slightly better than the previous live stream. So today we are going to be doing some live coding. Usually these things don't go super well. I mean, they go well, just not super smoothly, but that's okay. And we are going to be covering the propConnect slash propProvider components within HSDS React to build basically a component and a subcomponent and show how those relationships work and how you can leverage the power of propProvider to build your components. A really good example of this thing happening is the page component. So every modern HSDS React component will be connected via propProvider. Sorry, propConnect. So this one needs to be refactored. So this, okay, there is a refactor happening. There's a PR right now where basically what what you should see at the bottom of every component is something that looks like this. The export is a prop connected component with a specific key. This is just a string to label what the component is, and then the actual component itself. It's basically using the pattern that you would get from React Redux with the connect, symbolizing that you're connecting this to some other context that lives somewhere else. So what you can do with the propProvider kind of pattern is, for example, if you get a button component, import, I need to turn on JSX or something, JavaScript, React, sure. Okay, so I'm gonna hide this, cool. So if you import button from HSDS, here, help scout, HSDS React, component, oh my goodness, button, great. So if you import this, let's just do the whole thing. Why not? Import React from React. Okay, so now I have my button component, and I have my component thing, yay. Okay, so you have your component, and now you want to return a div because this is all your component is doing, because your component is great, it's super lean and doesn't do much. Great. Button. And I just want to use my button. Button, I know, is a prop connected component. So if I did propProvider, if I added propProvider and a const app equals, this is my application here, I can return, say, a div like so, and then I can use my component thingy, yeah, like that. And propProvider, what it does is it's once you use it, similar to a Redux provider, except you can have multiple of these, anywhere in your application, could be directly like this, or the my component thing, yeah, could be a sub child or grandchild of propProvider. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a direct descendant of it. Once you pass in, this is using the new React context API, so it accepts value as a property. And I'm just going to write this up here. propProvider props, just so it's a little bit simpler to see versus me writing it in line right here. So what you want to do is you want to target the specific component that you want to provide props for. In this case, we want button. And we want the button to be a version 2 button. We want the kind to be a primary button for reasons. And we want the size to be XL. Why not? Great. So now, if I provide this, without even touching the button, it absorbs these specific properties, the version, the kind, and the size. Cool. The cool thing about propProvider is that, like I mentioned before, you can use it as many times as you want. Anytime that a propProvider encounters another propProvider, it extends the values that are associated with it. So if I did have something that looked like this, except here I'm specifying, hey, I want my button to be small. When the button finally renders, when React combs through the tree, it first finds a PropProvider. Great. It'll be a version 2, primary, extra large button. I just did a double check to make sure my screen is showing okay, everything looks good. Great. And now, when it goes into my component thing, yay, it sees that there's another PropProvider. It'll remember these specific properties, and then it'll look for any kind of matching keys that it needs to merge. In this case, it does. It finds it. There's a button. So, once this gets parsed out, the size will be from XL will be replaced with small. So if this happened to have another property like aria role, I don't know, presentation for reasons, then this gets compounded into this. Basically the usual way object extension works. And once that's done, it'll glob all that together and pass it into button. So that's a really, really good way, a really good system of being able to customize components properties from any level within your application, which is great. But the cool thing that you can do with PropProvider is that you can use it to extend subcomponents, whether subcomponents belong to the main one or not. In the case of page, the page is the primary component. Let me zoom in for you. The page is a primary component. However, page needs to be able to extend or adjust the behavior of certain other components within it. In this case, it's adjusting the behavior of accordion. So if an accordion component appears within page, it needs to be adjusted slightly. It also adjusts the page section, header, and content to be responsive. And the responsive comes from this props. And the subcomponents kind of render as they normally would, declaratively. There's no association between the child to the parent. It's up to the parent to reflect its changes to the child, which is how we should be thinking about React. And funny enough, this pattern of trying to target children components, whether it being a subcomponent, a direct subcomponent or not, is basically how you think about and write CSS. React does provide an API sorta like this. They have React Children, which allows you to do things with the direct children property of a React component. For example, map. You can map through them and do things and enhance them. For the longest time, maybe not so much anymore, but in the beginning, this is the technique you would use to enhance child things, to give it extra properties or modify things or whatever it is you want. But as we've learned, oftentimes your components may be wrapped with something else. And if you're using React Redux, you might wrap it with a connect. So when React renders this out, it's actually going to be this. Let's pretend that's the name of the connect component, and this, right? So if PropProvider used the React Children method to enhance the things, then it wouldn't work because it would enhance connect, not my component thing, yay. And under the hood, like I mentioned, it's just using React context. It's just kind of enhancing it in a very powerful, easy to use, and convenient way for you. That way you don't need to manage context, use the context provider, consumer, manage, and blah, 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 all that stuff. It does it for you, which is great because, yeah, the more stuff that's kind of magically extracted from you, but in a relatively kind of easy to override way, the better, in my opinion. So with that said, let us create our component. What kind of component should I create? I need to find a theme. What is a good movie? I like Napoleon Dynamite. No, 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 no. Nacho Libre. Yeah. So let's create a Nacho Libre component. We're going to create a Nacho component as a parent and a Libre component as the subcomponent. So the cool thing about HSDS React is it has, if you're using VS Code, it has a built-in generator. What you do is you press Command-Shift-P, open up the whatever this thing is called inside of VS Code. Look for task. You want to find run task. This is the one you need. Once you select it, it'll crawl through your package JSON to find all of the npm-based scripts, but then also it'll look through your VS Code directory to see if it can find any tasks that you might have specified in your project. In this case, in HSDS React, we have a task called Remake. Remake is a special library that I built that allows you to generate things based on template files. So I've set up Remake to generate components. In this case, we're going to press Enter to select Remake. And now we're going to name our new component. We are going to name it Nacho. Cool. Interesting. Base style is not defined. What? Uh-oh. I have a boo-boo. Probably. We'll see. It's complaining about something. So unfortunately, my styles did not compile for some reason. Base style not defined? I'm not sure what that means. So I think there is an issue that... Let me just try this again, pretend you didn't see anything. So these are the remake templates. Live coding is going well so far. Let me try this again. I just made some adjustment in my template because apparently it doesn't like that particular combination of things. So let's try this again. We're going to generate our Nacho component. Okay, no more complaints. All is fine. You can see that we have our component right here. In addition to that, we have our Nacho story generated inside of stories right here. Right. So let us start development. npm start to fire up Storybook. Let's do its thing. And let's take a look at Nacho. So we can see that it is scaffolded all the things we need to start development of our brand new Nacho component. It's not going to do much, but well, we'll figure out what it can do. I'm just going to make it render like a blue box within a red box or something. Something very simple, but enough for you to get an understanding of how the relationships between the propConnected and the propProvider kind of thing works. Cool. Storybook is up. Let us find our Nacho component. Yeah. So nothing is rendering here. What you're seeing here, this is actually Artboard. GitHub Help Scout Artboard, which is another library that I created to help make UI development and design, testing, QAing, and stuff like that a lot easier. And funny enough, this was created before Storybook 5. The Chrome and the UI that you're seeing right here, this is Storybook 5. It's Storybook 4, which is what we're on for the longest time. Storybook 5 was actually a pretty recent update. Storybook 4 didn't have any of this. It was very bare bones in terms of UI development niceties. So you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can kind of, well, you could have done this full screen thing, but then it wasn't as slick. You need to do a keyboard command. You can pop out an iframe easily. But Storybook 5 provides all that for you, which is great. So, Nacho component, nothing rendering right now. Let us just make it render. It's rendering children, which I guess is fine. So, Nacho stories. Okay. Let's just make it render. What did he say? Nacho Libre stretchy pants. Chancho. That's it. Stretchy pants. Ah, what is that quote? This is very important. I need this. I need this. There we go. Just for fun. Yeah, so now I should see my Nacho component rendering this fabulous quote. It's working great. Cool. So the only thing I want to do so far is just style my nacho component a little bit. So I'm going to grab that guy, do this, do that, and we're going to give it a padding of that and a boo background color of green. No, blue. Nah, Dodger blue. Okay, so this is something that you will see in a lot of HSDS React components, base styles. Base styles is very, very important when it comes to styling any component within HSDS React. If your styled component doesn't have it, please add it in. The reason why base styles exist is all it does is this. It adds border box, and also some sort of font family thing and some font size. These are the three things it adds. Well, it adds this with a fallback and various other things. There's fallbacks and stuff for base styles. So the reason why this is super important, especially this part, is because there are environments, well, there's only one. The main application environment doesn't have the box sizing border box reset for its global CSS styles, which means if you have something with a width of 200 and you have something with a padding of 20, the actual width will be 240 because 200 plus 20 plus 20 is 240. And a bunch of other things, but mainly width and height are the things that get messed up the most. Box sizing, border box, kind of adjusts it, normalizes it, so that when you say width 20, that's what you get. And because box sizing border box isn't applied necessarily in HSApp or any kind of default CSS state that you would integrate HSDS within, we need to provide the component with this so that it is out of the box perfect, styled, without needing to depend on any global styles or anything. It works out of the box, no extra CSS necessary, batteries not included, by Mattel. Cool, so our Nacho component has a padding of 20, and it also renders with Dodger Blue. Let's just give it a max width of something. I don't know, just for fun. Yeah, that's too small. There. Great. The cool thing about Artboard is this canvas thing. It has a resizing thing here. So if you want to test the responsive behaviors of your component, you can. You can just resize your guide to see how it responds, which is kind of nice. So I have my main parent wrapper outer component, my Nacho component. Now I need to create my Libre component, which is a subcomponent of Nacho. So out of the box, we can see that we have our Nacho component. We have some sort of initial get class scaffoldy HSDS stuff, goodness. But the main thing is down here, propConnect component. We propConnect it with the special key. In this case, it's just, in this case, it's just Nacho. And then we provide the component that we want to propConnect, which is the Nacho component. So let us create the Libre component. I'm just going to copy all this, new file, Nacho. Since it's a subcomponent, we'll name our file like this, ESX. Libre. Sure, Nacho Libre props. So I'm just going to replace that. Standard props, cool. And then we're going to rename Nacho to Libre. Nacho Libre. Okay. Okay, so instead of Nacho UI, I'm going to create a Libre UI. Again, we need to have the base styles here. And let's make it red. Don't need that. Great, this is fine. So the other thing about base styles is it also targets all the children inside to have the box sizing border box reset. This is just like a fallback mechanism because once you have an HSDS component, it's assumed that everything else inside will be HSDSified and have that base box sizing border box reset. But it's not necessarily guaranteed when you want to integrate a legacy-based UI within HSDS React. So for example, if you want to render an HSDS modal, but you have, for reasons, like an older interface, like an old WYSIWYG editor already pre-styled and all that kind of stuff inside there, added to the HSDS React modal. This is a case where base styles might work against you because of the I'm going to reset all the things situation. Let me just confirm that before I speak any further. Base. Yes, it does this kind of child star wildcard match thing. So in the case of like in a modal, if you have an HSDS modal, but you've rendered a non-HSDS component inside that, for reasons, breaks when you have the box sizing border box thing going on, you gotta wrap that guy with something else to kind of reset the box sizing so that that child component doesn't explode when it tries to render within something sane that has box sizing border box reset it. Anyway, let's get into the Libre component. We have this. We're going to style it red. The padding is going to be the same. Instead of Nacho UI, I'm going to do Libre UI. Great. And when you have a subcomponent, you attach it as a static to the primary component like this. Import Libre from .nacho.libre, and then you do static Libre equals Libre. So the propConnect down here, it by default knows how to hoist statics upward. This is a very, very important mechanism built inside of all the higher order components within HSDS React and basically any kind of higher order component that you will see in any library. React Redux, GraphQL, Apollo, any kind of styled components, anything. They basically leverage a library called hoist non-React statics. We're getting this from React Utils, which gets it from the actual library. React Utils acts as the kind of adapter where we would interface with this particular library. This is like the go-to technique. React's documentation even mentions this to handle your statics, because if you don't have that, the higher order component that wraps your inner or wrapped component won't bring your statics up. So things like subcomponents like this, or default props, or class names, or whatever it is, they don't get hoisted up, and now you have problems. So pro tip, anytime you want to create a higher order component wrapper, whether it's 1 level deep or 2 levels deep, by 2 levels deep, meaning you have a function that returns a function that returns your component, use hoist non-React statics, and that is the guy that you will return like this. You return the hoist non-React statics with your connected your wrapper component, and then the raw component like that as the secondary argument, and it takes care of the statics for you. Very important. propConnect takes care of that for you, so you don't need to think about it, which is great. So by adding Libre as a static here, the propConnect knows how to handle the hoisting. It's fine. Exports it. Great. This kind of hoisting mechanism with higher order components, wrappers, and all that kind of stuff, typically, I mean, you will find this in kind of any kind of UI library, just because that's kind of needed. However, if you are working more on the application layer, where you don't need to fidget with lower level components and things like that, you probably don't need to run into this too much. But in the odd case that you do, when you need to create your own, say, connect mechanism or whatever it is, yeah, highly recommend that library. I mean, that's the go-to. That's like the only library that you would use to handle that kind of situation. So check that out. Great. So now I have my Libre component connected to Nacho. Apologies by kind of going to these random tangents. They're kind of important pieces to create this kind of thing. Make it happen. Stories, Nacho. Okay, so now that I have my Libre component, I can do this. Nacho, Libre, and it should render. Great. I have my quote that's rendered in a Libre component inside of my Nacho component. So let's say I want Libre, I need to do something with it. Let's just make it very, very, very simple. You wouldn't really code this in practice, but I'm just doing this purely for demonstration purposes. Is wrestling. This is a great prop. Default prop is false. I gotta change this because TypeScript is great. I mean, TypeScript is great. It's just sometimes it's fidgety. So, is wrestling. I'm gonna pluck this out. So, if it's wrestling, I'm gonna make it do something. So, const style equals padding. I'm gonna adjust the padding like crazy. If it's wrestling, then the padding will be 100 px. Otherwise, it'll be the standard 20 px. And then we're gonna have that style equals style. So by default, nothing has changed. However, let us adjust this is wrestling. Let's make it true. And now you should see it explode. Yep, that's what happens when it's wrestling. Pro tip. Yeah, if you're to pass in Boolean values for React components, you don't need to do equals true. You can just do this. It means the same thing. But if you do false, you need to do this. So whether you add equals true in curlies or not, up to you. Typically, I don't, unless I write tests, because it makes the test a little bit more clearer when you can see equals true or equals false and things like that. But in practice, I just do this. Great. So when it's wrestling, it looks like that. When it's not wrestling, it doesn't look so explodey. So the cool thing about this subcomponent kind of architecture is that you can use nacho.libre anywhere else. You don't need to use it within Nacho. You have the availability to use it in another kind of context, which is great. So I'm going to make an example here where I have Nacho. Like that. Okay. So now we're going to see two guys like this. Great. Just add a little breakpoint in between so that we can have separation. Great. So in this one, we're just seeing the Libre component by itself. And this one, Nacho, this Libre component is inside of Nacho. So now we have Nacho Libre. Great. And the thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, when a Libre component renders within Nacho, make it wrestle by default so that the user doesn't have to specify is wrestling like this manually. Otherwise, don't leave that alone. Let the user control their own destiny. So before I do that, I need to make one small change. We have to make sure that the namespace that we give propConnect is unique. Because right now this component key is Nacho for both of them. So the convention I have is this. I don't know if this is the best, but this is what we kind of have right now, where the component key is a thing that basically exports a component key. If a component, if there's only one component, no subcomponents, it's just a string. Otherwise, it's an object. So in this case, we have a parent and we have subs. So the component key will have the name of the parent component, which is Nacho. And then we have Libre, which is the child component or subcomponent. So this is another important detail. When you go to use your component, because it's a static property, you can use it with a dot. So you get that kind of dot notation, this belongs to this kind of relationship, which is really cool. And ideally, you'd want your namespace to kind of follow that kind of pattern because now they match. They map really well. However, and this is what we had for the longest time until we updated React to React 16 and we updated Enzyme from 2 to 3. When Enzyme did their update, they changed their matcher so that it wouldn't evaluate this as a component if you were to do a find. It actually considers Libre to be a CSS class of Nacho. So what it's looking for is this instead of this. So that became a problem. So what we did to kind of remedy that is during the upgrades process, I basically renamed anything with a component key containing a dot to just have that. So that is what we're doing now. And to be honest, I mean, moving forward, we could add the dot back in if, in theory, we're going to be using cyan test, because cyan doesn't care what your components' names are. It cares what the DOM structure is. Separate video, separate talk. But for now, we're going to go with this. And now component key isn't a string anymore, it's an object. So now we're going to give this the Nacho key. And now we're going to give this the Libre key. And this should render exactly the same. Great. So within Nacho, anyway, no. I'm going to show you how propConnect kind of works inside of our story. Nacho, here we go. We are going to grab propProvider here, and we're just going to do this, propProvider. We're just going to wrap this entire thing with a propProvider. We have the value of Nacho Libre. We're targeting that specific component, and we're going to change is wrestling to true. So now this one's going to explode. Great, because when React, like I mentioned earlier, when React renders it out, if there's a propProvider, it'll have those properties as values somewhere in context. And when you propConnect to it, the propConnect tries to find those things in order to absorb the properties. And if the namespaces match, then the kind of hydration process will work. So in this case, if I were to move Nacho Libre into this propProvider area, this too is wrestling to true. And if I were to move this out, it'll lose that bit of propProvider thing. If none of them are in the propProvider, like that, then they don't get affected. If, for reasons, you have nested propProviders, like so, and I change this to false, the closest one to your component wins. But let's just add something here. Class name, hello, like that. So if I inspect element on Nacho Libre, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit here. We should, in theory, see a hello class name attached to it, which we can see right here. Oh yeah, propProvider, you can extend any class you want, any property you want, man. So any HTML appropriate property can be extended onto propProvider on top of any React property. So on click, ARIA roles, class name, ID, anything you can think of, it gets passed into the component that you're trying to extend or you're trying to adjust. So here, if I write a class name there, hello there, so instead of hello, it'll be there. Just because if the property key matches, it replaces it. It doesn't kind of extend it. But if I did, what else can I do with this? Yeah, I think that's kind of it for the propProvider. You can extend. And for the propProvider value, you can add as many components as you want. In this case, we're just targeting Nacho Libre, but you can also add a button like this. You can add a card. You can add as many as you want to be extended. All right, so then I'm going to get rid of my prop providers. Click, 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 click. And now that we know how that works, which is great, we're going to jump back to our Nacho component. And what we're going to do is we're going to import propProvider from /propProvider. And what we're going to do is we are going to use it here. And I'm just going to write this here, const propProvider props equals, we want to target the Nacho Libre component to make it wrestling true by default. So let us grab the key. In this case, it'll be it'll be Libre. It is a string. And then we are going to say is wrestling is true. And then we're going to pass this into here as a value, like so. And now by magic, if you were to use, where is it? Stories, Nacho. So if you were to use a Nacho Libre component inside of a Nacho component, it'll be wrestling by default. If you were to use it outside, it works just fine. So here you can say is wrestling is true, and you can manually do it, or you can do it as wrestling is false. But the cool thing is that, like I mentioned, is wrestling specified by the parent Nacho component should be true if a child Nacho Libre is present. And because the propProvider doesn't use the React Children API to do this, Nacho Libre can be nested as deep as you need it, as you want to under Nacho, and it'll still work. So this will still work just fine. And the cool thing is that if you were, for reasons, to provide your own is wrestling prop onto Nacho Libre, that is the one that takes the highest priority. So it doesn't matter if you provided or extended or did any of that kind of stuff. This will always be the source of truth. So, hopefully, if this demonstration works. So by default, the Nacho Libre component will have is wrestling true if it renders within Nacho. But if you say is wrestling false on Nacho Libre, that is the one that's the one that's going to take effect. It works. Great. Yeah. So that still gives the user ultimate flexibility in terms of what they want. We're just specifying defaults within our Nacho component, and with that, you're able to kind of like adjust sub-component behavior from within, like a parent component somehow, in a very, very declarative way. No need to do any kind of React Children mapping or any of that kind of stuff. We're just using context that is provided to us with the propProvider / propConnect API, which is kind of very, very heavily inspired by how React Redux kind of handles things. And with that, we have a brand new Nacho and Nacho Libre component that is self-aware when it comes to wrestling. So if the Libre component renders within Nacho, it'll be wrestling by default. If not, it'll be just hanging out with stretchy pants. So hopefully this little live coding demo was helpful in showcasing how we would think about creating components with subcomponents and using propConnect to kind of adjust the behavior of subcomponents from their respective parent component, and diving kind of deep in terms of like context, React Children extension, and all that fun stuff. But not as fun as Nacho Libre, I suppose. And yeah, hopefully you found this helpful, and hope you have a fantastic day. Catch you later. Bye.